Alright, I'm back again. Cut off a little late there, and I went ahead and viewed the entire thing to find out exactly where I was going to stop. And apparently it's picking up my breathing very, really well, because I'm not hearing it very hard when I breathe in too. So let's get back into it, shall we? Joe Monroe, Ricey's attorney, points out the decision means that everyone seen carrying a firearm in any place that is prohibited without a license is subject to being stopped, arrested, and prosecuted, even if they have a license. In principle, that should apply to police officers as well as private citizens. In practice, of course, this standard means that only law enforcement personnel would have a license to bear arms in public. A license of any sort, of course, is a government-issued document that transmutes an innate individual right into a state-conferred and state-revocable privilege. Ricey's case demonstrates that the only advantage conferred by a firearms license is an affirmative defense against a spurious criminal charge. Advocates of a state monopoly on the use of force would not be appeased if the civilian population were entirely deprived of access to firearms. Efforts are underway to criminalize civilian use of purely defensive weapons. In early December, California's Second District Court of Appeal overturned an 11-year-old state law forbidding felons to possess body armor. It's just funny because I actually thought it was Florida at first. I've been telling other people about this before I actually sat down. So California's Second District Court of Appeals overturned an 11-year-old state law forbidding felons to possess body armor. The law was challenged by Ethan Salem, a parolee convicted of voluntary manslaughter, who was arrested in 2007 when police noticed that he was wearing a 10-pound bulletproof vest. Certainly Salem wasn't wearing body armor because he was going to a job interview or going on a date, snarked a press release from the Los Angeles Police Protective League, the LAPPL. In fact, since neither Salem or any other passengers at the time of the traffic stop was armed, and given that he wasn't accused of any other offense, it's only a self-serving insulation to suggest that he was detained en route to a crime. Sorry about that. California Attorney General Jerry Brown insisted that police are acutely threatened by possession of military-grade body armor by felons. Has promised to appeal the decision to the state Supreme Court. If newly enthroned LAPD Chief Charlie Beck has his way, the law will someday be expanded to encompass the entire civilian population. The increased number of assaults with the deadly weapons against our frontline public safety defenders is a clear indication that we cannot give violent felons the upper hand. There is an absolute need for a ban of these types of body armor for anyone other than law enforcement personnel or law enforcement related personnel. The men and women defending public safety across the state and the people of California deserve no less. The emphasis is added, and the accent's all mine. But Beck's statement is a tower of non-sequesters piled unsteadily atop a foundation of begged questions. Beck begins with an unwarranted assertion that police confront unprecedented danger from firearms. In fact, 2009, as I previously pointed out, was a remarkably safe year for police, even in context of a decades-long decline in a number of duty-related firearms deaths. Beck somehow assumes that the proposal to ban ownership of body armor by law-abiding civilians follows logically from his desire to restrain violent felons. He compounds the fallacy by asserting that the people of California deserve no less than the privilege of being deprived of legal access to a purely defensive weapon. Not surprisingly, the LAPPL which the same police union has described civilian ownership of body armor as an unacceptable threat, went into paroxysms, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, of outrage over a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision that imposed modest, if inadequate, limits on the use of tasers. Specifically, the court ruled that the use of a taser by a police officer was to subdue a mentally troubled but non-violent 21-year-old man constituted excessive force. I just came from lunch, excuse me. In this case, the victim, 21-year-old Carl Bryan, lost several teeth when he fell face first to the pavement after being tasered by Officer Brian McPherson. At the time of the taser strike, Bryan and McPherson were separated by a distance of 15 to 20 feet. Bryan, who had been stopped for a seatbelt violation, was throwing what McPherson called a bizarre fit, but did nothing to threaten the officer or anyone else. As every street cop knows, any suspect within 15 feet who is actively resisting verbal commands is a threat to officer safety, sniveled the union. When a suspect fails to comply with verbal commands, it means the situation is rapidly escalating and some form of force will be required to gain compliance. Non-lethal force is the safest and best way to obtain the needed compliance. Non-lethal force instruments are designed to avoid injury to both officer and suspects by swiftly incapacitating the suspect. Two problems thrust themselves upon us. The first is posed by the fact that a taser is not a non-lethal weapon. It is a frequently lethal one. The second problem is best stated as a question. What about those increasingly common incidents in which innocent individuals are faced with unwarranted and improper police demands for compliance? Why should we assume that in such circumstances it is proper to protect the policeman by incapacitating the recalcitrant civilian instead of the civilian taking prudent actions to protect himself from his criminal assault? It is possible to protect oneself from the potential lethal effects of a taser strike. Florida-based, that's why I thought it was Florida instead of California, okay? Florida-based body armor company called Point Blank Solutions sells a taser-resistant fabric called Thor Shield that has successfully been tested against stun weapons of up to 900,000 volts. In today's marketplace, there is more and more non-lethal energy weapons for police, military, and civilian use, but no defense from these devices, observes the company, which proudly announces that it has stepped up to fill the void in energy weapon protection. Thor Shield is comprised of a polyester fabric layered over a conductive material. It is designed to create a circuit loop that will return the electric charge to a weapon without inflicting a shock to the subject. If you are hit, the taser gun won't work, explains George Schultz, who invented the fabric. We return the voltage back to the gun. Light and breathable, the fabric is thin enough to be sewn into clothing. Assuming you've been paying attention thus far, you know what's coming next. G2 Consulting, the Arizona-based contractor that serves as exclusive distributor of the Thor Shield anti-taser fabric, is committed to officer safety. For this reason, Thor Shields is only sold to military and law enforcement agencies under a non-disclosure agreement. The fabric is used in clothing intended to protect a law enforcement officer should his taser fall into the wrong hands. Somebody will eventually reverse engineer Thor Shield and devise another suitable countermeasure to the portable electroshock torture device and make it available to the productive segment of the population. At that point, the air will be rent with anguished cries about the new threat to officer safety and demands for legislative action to criminalize private ownership of taser-resistant fabric. If the police are permitted to assault and detain peaceful civilians,